You can see the deals as they come on the market. We try to update them pretty regularly, at least once a week, but usually several times a week. Just most of the deals come on the market towards the end of the week, so we tend to see the most movement on Friday mornings and Thursday nights. So to get access to the list regularly, so to actually be on the list, so we have a 3-part training series. The first part covers just infill development and how we see these deals, how we analyze them, and then the second part is our building process, and then the third part is just how to look at the list and review it. So in order for you to have access to that list, you have to review all 3. If you currently have access to the list, we are going to be requiring this in the near future. The other aspect of that too is if you are an investor, we're going to require that you sign a buyer's representative agreement with one of the realtors that have already gone through the training and that have access to the list, just because it makes negotiating and going through these deals much easier, because these guys already understand our process and what it's going to take to go through all this. We've noticed that a lot, 90% of realtors out there are mostly just in the retail market and don't really understand development or investing very much. So we just prefer we set you up with somebody that understands exactly what our process is. And then the other thing is, if you're a realtor, is that we're just going to sign an agreement with you saying that you're going to introduce your clients to us early on in the process, so that we don't get brought into the deal when it's too late and we can't do any due diligence on it and help with that way. And then if you're the investor that's buying this, we're just going to ask that you sign an agreement that you'll use us for the services if you're using our strategy. So the reason why we do this is because it's it's basically a way for us to gain business, but also we're passionate about helping other investors grow their wealth and income as well. So we've had success in infill development, and we recognized a niche market that we can bring our experience and team to, that we can help other investors build their wealth on something that really not a lot of people are aware of this strategy, and very few people can really get it through to the finish line. They don't have there's very few people across the country that have the team in place and the skills to do this from start to finish. And that's why it's still a great opportunity, is because it is multi-step, and it does take, it's more involved than just a simple, buy it and flip it kind of deal. There's multiple steps, but we have the process in place to get you through every single step, and we've, made it as easy as possible along the way. So the other thing I want to talk about is, kind of what we offer. So, we basically offer help every step of the way. So from the very beginning with due diligence, even before that, even before you get a deal under contract, we're going to help you with negotiation and leverage. So how you can, kind of negotiate the best deal. Now, some of these you're just going to buy them for market price because they are at market price. Some of these deals that are on the list are probably a little bit overpriced, especially if they've been sitting on the market for a little while. So we're going to offer you some insight on you and your realtor on how to structure the deal to make sure it works for you. Obviously with investors, nobody wants to lose money. Sometimes, really how to not lose money is to make sure that you're structuring the deal properly and making sure that you kind of do the proper due diligence. And we actually are in this deal with you together. In fact, we're so confident that we're going to make the deals work, or that the deals are going to work. So by the time we're done with due diligence, we'll give you a 1-page sheet that has all the details of the deal, and we're going to back that up with a guarantee that you'll make 100% of the profit that we are saying that you'll make by the end of due diligence. Now, in this initial phase, well, we'll get into this later. Our guarantee is if you don't make 100% of the profit that we say you'll make by the end of due diligence, we're going to back it up with a $50,000 guarantee that will basically withhold our profits up to $50,000 until you do make 100% of the profit that we came up with at the end of due diligence, by the end of due diligence. So I'll kind of cover into a little bit also, like on the part of the due diligence, there's a lot of steps to it. So we'll also provide you that how we underwrite that. We'll give you a list of our due diligence process and like all the details that we go over during due diligence. So we're going to give that to you so you can follow along. We're going to do a lot of that due diligence for you. There's going to be a little bit that's going to be required from you. Part of that is, the getting the financing in place, that kind of thing, and making sure that we have those numbers. Part of that's also going to be, reaching out to a property manager. We're not property managers, but we do understand the rental market. But we also have property managers that we can put you in touch with as well. But we're going to basically offer you that support and step-by-step due diligence process. If the existing house has to be renovated, we can also do that for you. We do the entitlements management. We do any kind of horizontal development work that needs to be done. We do that. And we also do the vertical construction. So we're kind of the one-stop shop for all these deals. That's partly why it works, is we control the flow. We can control the timelines and the budget because we're vertically integrated on all of our steps. Also, anybody that's interested, we do have a free book that we give away. It's Ultimate Guide to Infill Development. So it kind of gives you some more insight on what we do. We'll also give you the actual due diligence checklist. By the end of due diligence, we're going to give you our one-page underwriting worksheet. So that's what we base our guarantee on. So basically, by the last day of due diligence, you'll have a one-page sheet that says this is what the cash out of pocket is going to be. This is going to be what the profit looks like. And this depends on your strategy as well. If you're going to keep it as a rental, we're going to say, okay, this is what the underwriting for the rental process looks like. And so that's going to be your kind of your guide to what we underwrite, and then we'll compare that to at the end of the deal to what we underwrote it at. And then if we don't perform on our end and you don't meet that, then we are actually withhold $50,000 in our profit at the end to refund you if that doesn't happen. We're also going to provide you, so we're going to provide you our entitlement process checklist, our construction process and inspection checklist. On all of our new construction builds, we do third-party new home inspections in 4 different phases. So that's a framing and rough-ins, drywall, interior and exterior finishes, and then also the final inspection when it's all said and done. And then we provide you that report at all 4 of those phases. And then at each, we basically fix any issues that come up along the way. So you have that documented proof that you can have that peace of mind that you're getting a well-built product. And then if your strategy is to sell the finished product at the end, you can provide that to the buyers, and the buyers know that they're getting a good product, and they can see the inspection report without having to do that on their own. A lot of people just look at their inspection report, which is fine, but it allows us to basically be confident that the house is built the right way, and we covered any mistakes or fixed any mistakes that came up along the way. The other thing that we're going to start doing here soon is having a monthly progress call. So any of the deals that are actively going, this is going to be open to everybody. So if you have an active deal that you've purchased, or if you're just interested in what we have going on, historically or at any given point, we're going to be doing this every week. I think it's going to end up being the last Friday of every month. We'll cover the updates on all the projects. And then we also have an entitlements guarantee. So that's also like on this deal of the week it's especially essential, because essentially what we're doing is we're going to say that we're guaranteeing that you're going to get the number of units that we underwrite at entitlement. Or when we're going through entitlement. So if we say that you can split this off and get 2 lots, and we get through due diligence and say that you can split 2 lots off of it and we can only get 1, we're actually going to waive our next fee, or apply that fee that we charge towards the development costs. So your role in all this as an investor is you just make the big decisions. We do the heavy lifting. So you don't have to be an expert in infill development. You don't have to be an expert in new construction. You don't have to be an expert in entitlements. You don't have to be an expert in flipping. We've done all this. Our team is in place that have done all this. We understand every step of the process. Our target timeline is 6 figures in 36 months or less is kind of what we name this. Every deal is different. So some deals I've seen, some deals where we can actually do them in less than a year. That's pretty rare on these. There's some specific things that have to be in place on that property in order for it to be under a year. Essentially, it has to be build ready. So most of these are, typically a year and a half to 2.5 or 3 years. So just so you're aware of that. And then even like if you're interested or have clients or whatever that are interested in bigger deals that are, let's say 5 or more units, some of those can take 3.5 or 4 years. So what we offer with all this is we offer protection. So we're basically guaranteeing and essentially we're guaranteeing our profits for your profit. You hold full ownership in the deal, so we're not partnering on this deal, to the extent of like we don't have partnership ownership. That on a lot of these deals that would be more beneficial to us as far as a profit percentage goes. But we've just found it easier if you just go on and buy the property and you basically hire us. You're hiring us to do everything. You can fire us at any given point. There will be contracts in place that, obviously, and you can't fire us for no reason, but that's like kind of your control over the deal. If you're not happy with the way things are going, you can always fire us, and that incentivizes us to make sure that we are doing everything that we said we're going to do. And why we do this, and why you'd want to work with Matson Homes. So we specialize in infill development. So we do small multifamily, ADUs, subdivisions, basically all the exact strategies that cities like Boise and it's kind of growing throughout the valley here and really all over the country. Cities are encouraging more dense development, and so that's why we're doing this. We've already figured out the business the hard way. So we've already made the mistakes. We've gone through the really tough times during COVID of, material shortages, having to, we've worked through all the bad contractors. We have a really good team of contractors in place that can get these deals done, and everybody works really well together. So that's part of the value that we bring. Anybody can go out and theoretically go and be an owner builder of their own house. The problem is when you do that the first time, a lot of times the contractors that you're talking to aren't the same contractors that we're talking to. Not only that, but until you put together the team of contractors and work through contractors, you're going to lose money. You might lose 6 figures on a build if you don't have the systems in place properly. So we've completed these deals from single family flips to multi-unit developments, and we even hold rentals. So, every phase of these projects we've already done. So with that, we're going to kind of jump into this. We're going to cover we'll do the infill deal of the week first, and then we will jump into the other deals. Give me a second to pull up my spreadsheet here. Okay, we're first going to cover what the numbers look like here. Okay, so the address of this property is 1509 West Boise Avenue. This actually just came on the market. We got it in our inbox this morning, so it either came on last night or early this morning. I don't know how many people are going to see that it's splittable. Not very many people kind of understand this process, but it still seems like it's a pretty good deal and a great location. So I would be surprised if it lasts through the weekend. Even if one of our people doesn't buy it, I would be surprised if it lasts through the weekend. In fact, there might be people that do these lot splits on their own that see it and see what kind of deal it is. I'll show you the map and kind of how we split it here in a second. But first, we're going to cover the numbers. So this is kind of a unique lot where it actually is fronting 2 streets, and that's why it's splittable. Some of these you split them side by side because there's enough lot. This one is actually you split it off from the back, and the only way that's possible is because there's streets on both sides of it. And so we can actually split 2 lots off of it. It appears, now we haven't obviously done a survey or anything, but it appears the square footage and the measurements are enough to do this. On one lot, it's a little bit close, so that's going to be part of the due diligence process, is making sure that we can make both of those new lots that meet the new size requirements. We think that's going to be the case. The one is kind of close, so that's why that'll be during due diligence and doing the survey and getting all the existing property setbacks. Because all what we do on this very high level is we do, we look up the property and do the measurements that we can do overhead. But we didn't go on site and take measurements or anything like that. So that's something that we do during due diligence. So the home value, so it's priced at 529. It very may well sell for that price. We think it might be a little bit overpriced at that price, but it's probably right in line with where it should be market. We just we basically assume maybe it's more like 519. So the additional price you're paying for the land is 10,000 here. This is the per lot development costs. So entitlements cost basically 40,000 total, and then the development costs. So most of these lots, there's usually some kind of development that you have to do. Bare minimum, it's like bringing in the sewer line. But most of the time you have to upgrade the power infrastructure. Most of the time you have to upgrade the transformer, for example. Sometimes it's more involved than even that, but most of the time it's just upgrading the transformer. It's not prohibitively expensive. It just adds some cost to it. And then on most of these deals, particularly in the older parts of town, which is where you can do these, is you usually have to put in some kind of infrastructure. So if it doesn't already have sidewalks, the city always makes you put in sidewalks, detached sidewalks. They'll also make you put in curb and gutter if it doesn't have it. And sometimes the street has to be widened also. So when we look at this, we kind of know what those requirements are going into every single property. So we factor that into these costs. We kind of look at everything that we know that the city is going to require on each lot, and we look at those costs. Now, the other thing I'll say about this during due diligence is we have a way more comprehensive checklist that we go through, and we talk to every single department that we need to talk to and see what could possibly come up. So, for example, the one thing I don't do on every property is look up the distance of where the fire hydrant is. And if the fire hydrant is a certain distance away, that's going to come up in due diligence where we have to add a fire hydrant, and that can add to the cost. So that's just one of those things that, going into it, we're aware that we'll have to do further research on. And so that's just something to keep in mind. This new lot value, so this is what we think you can sell the new lot for at, basically as a, sell it to a builder like me, what I would pay for this type of lot. Sometimes you can get a little bit more than this. We try to be really conservative, especially because if we're going to be backing up our numbers with a guarantee, we have to be super conservative on our analysis going in. Then on here, so we have it just based on what new construction is sold in the area recently for price and size and time on market. We look at that's where we come up with these numbers. Basically what we think should be built on that lot. Again, we might modify this a little bit in further due diligence because there's a lot more that goes into this, but at a high level, that's what we kind of initially look at. So we think a 4-bedroom, 4.5 bath. This is really near BSU, so it would be a great rent by the room rental. So it would be really appealing to investors for resale at that level. Then we have our construction cost total. So this is per house, what it would cost, and that includes RP. So this is the total you're paying for each house to build, including the entitlements and the horizontal development. And then this is what, we have comps that have sold for this price recently. So that's where we're getting these numbers from, is comparable properties. Then we have the sales cost. This number here is assuming that you're going to carry a construction loan on it. This is usually for an entire year. A lot of times, we're going to have this built in 6 to 7 months, and then the exit, you can usually get out within 9 months from ground break. So hopefully this is an overestimate again. So then this is the profit per house on it. So this property, we think you can do we can get 2 lots out of it and do the same size house on both. So this is your profit per house. this is a really good number. And if you notice right above it, so Southeast Boise is a great location for these because you get really good price per square foot on the resale. And on these, the reason why this works is because essentially you're buying an existing house on a larger lot that you're getting the land essentially for free. Obviously there's some cost of splitting it, but you're walking into that with equity on the lot itself. And then we have a renovation budget. So we just do this at a high level. This house looks like it's been recently flipped, or at least recently remodeled. And the only thing I would say is in the basement, there's an incomplete bathroom. So I would turn that into a complete bathroom. It'd probably cost about $10,000. And then you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath instead of a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. So it just makes it more appealing. I'm not going to assume that increases the value very much, just the 10,000 you put into it. This would, be break even essentially if you didn't have these sales costs in here. So if you go to sell it on the tail end, essentially you lose a little bit of money because you're of these sales costs. And that's assuming that, in the year and a half or 2 years it takes to split all this, the market doesn't go up. So this is assuming the resale value is the same. And I guess at the same token that it doesn't go down as well. And we can talk about this later, but if the market is in a downward trajectory, we'll want to analyze this on that downward trajectory. Right now, it's pretty even. It can be up or down based on the part of the time of the year, but the market's been kind of stagnant for the last 2 years. And then we also look at this as renting it out. So before I get there, this is based on a house payment at 6.5% with 25% down. This is factoring in taxes and insurance. So we think it's going to be about $25.10 a month for 2 years to get it split, and then you can resell it. And then your rents every month will actually cover that mortgage payment. This property, again, since it's close to BSU, we think you can rent it out by the room. And this is what, so $2,700 a month total is what you should be able to get if you rent it by the room, that model. You do still lose a little bit of money of that because basically your rents are covering your mortgage, but then you have that sales cost here. So you're losing a little bit of that when you go sell it, but you're basically making it up for in the sale of these new properties. If you refinance all this, so this is factoring in refinancing the construction costs plus the interest costs. Most of these deals, you can actually roll the interest cost into the loan, the construction loan. And the reason why you can do that is because the loan to value is so good. So because you're walking in, you're basically bringing the equity of the land into the deal. So that lender is going to lend you the construction costs and the interest costs of the loan typically. Now, if you get like a local bank loan, like a ICCU or something, they might not do that. They might still do that, or they might say, okay, well, we're not going to cover the interest payments, but we will reimburse you for the cost that you have into the lot at this point. So it just kind of depends on the bank, and that's part of due diligence. We'll get those numbers honed in during due diligence based on your the exact loan structure that you want. Okay, and then this is your overall profit based on all that. This is the cash into the deal. What this is doing, this is assuming a 25% down loan, so like getting a DSCR loan. Now, if you're an investor and you want to live in the existing house, it's definitely turnkey. You could live in this house and like literally you could buy this on an FHA loan with 3% down. Your monthly payment will be higher, but your out-of-pocket expense is going to be much, much lower. You can get this for less than $100,000 out of pocket. It's just your monthly costs will go up and you're not going to get that rental income. But if you want to live there, instead of living in an apartment or something, you can do that. It's also factoring in doing the entitlements and development out of pocket, and then the difference between rents and rental income. So again, this number can change based on your financing strategy, or if you're some people want to just do everything cash, that's obviously going to change. Your ROI gets much better if you are using leverage. In fact, this number could look way better if you do this as a live-in property and your capital invested is under 100,000. That turns into a pretty crazy deal. So even at this is probably the best return we've seen on a single lot like this out of any deal that we've seen since we've been doing this. So 260% ROI basically on your cash. Then the other reason, or the other thing that we look at, so most of these deals on this list, most of the time they're not great investments on their own. So like if you couldn't split the lot off, most people aren't going to go buy this as a rental because it doesn't necessarily pencil as a rental. Unless you're just, looking for a tax haven and, looking for the appreciation, it's still a good neighborhood, all that fun stuff for a rental. But this is basically, it's not necessarily a property that somebody's going to say, oh, I want to buy this as a rental because it pencils really well. So we factor this into, okay, sell that original house because it ultimately you probably wouldn't have bought it if you couldn't split it. You're going to get $100,000 cash back. So you're going to get basically your down payment back. And then you're going to have only 65,000 capital remaining in the deal, which by the way, like the numbers are so good on this, you could actually probably get all this capital back and more. Again, something we would look at during due diligence if you want to maximize your or limit your cash out of pocket when it's all said and done. The only difference is basically your cash flow would go down. But based on we just type in formulas here. So basically based on all this, 65,000 out of pocket, you have over $600,000 in equity remaining in this deal. And that's why it cash flows so well. So this is what the new construction rents we think would be. This would actually be like just typing this in as a 4-bedroom on Rent-A-Meter, it plugs in this number. That's what we do at a high level. But even, kind of scrutinizing it, say if I had to rent it by the room, it still pencils out really well like that. So then this is what your new construction payments would be, and then your monthly cash flow. So what this doesn't factor in is vacancy, property management, that kind of stuff. So, a lot of investors self-manage. If you don't, you have to factor in the, let's say it's 10% of this for your property management, or sorry, 10% of this. So this goes down by $640, but you're still cash flowing $1,000. So ultimately we look at that and what your strategy is going to be. We also plug this into AirDNA. So this is just what AirDNA gives us. The one thing I will say about AirDNA, it's a great tool for like your high level analysis, but what it doesn't factor in necessarily is your competition in the area. So like, when you have, and the other thing too is like part of this whole thing is if your strategy is to keep it and you want to maximize the cash flow by doing it as an Airbnb, we can actually design these properties as Airbnbs so that it's maximizing every single square foot to keep your cost low, and it's also maximizing the rental dollars. So there's certain strategies that we look at for Airbnb and even on long-term rentals that we look at where we build this specifically for that strategy to minimize your costs and maximize the cash flow. So when we look at this as against AirDNA, this is probably really low. Honestly, like they type in their numbers, but they're taking it as a whole market analysis, not necessarily by comparing unit to unit. So when we go to further underwrite this, if your strategy is you want to keep it as an Airbnb, we're going to look at other Airbnbs in the market. What do they have? What do their numbers look like? What's their vacancy, or what are their average nightly rents? So we'll be able to come up with a little bit better number. And then again, this isn't factoring in utilities or management or anything like that. So once you factor those in, this is not as profitable if you're not self-managing, but it could be more profitable if you self-manage, but also are designing it as an Airbnb. All right, so now I'm going to get into I'm going to stop the share here really quick, but I'm going to show this specific overhead on this deal and why this will work this way. Part of what makes, kind of like my skill set also personally. So, back a few years ago when I first started getting into development is I read through the development code, like literally the whole, like 250 pages or whatever it is, front to back of the development code in the city of Boise. I did that 5 times on my first development deal. And so, I kind of took the time to go through that. Now, obviously that changed in 2023 and I haven't read it front to back. Well, I kind of have in segments, mostly in the areas where it's changed, but I will say I've reviewed the aspects that are pertinent to what we're doing. I've reviewed them at least a dozen times and we've done deals on this. And we've underwritten hundreds of these deals. We underwrite hundreds of deals or review or analyze hundreds of deals to get to one good deal. So anymore, I can basically go down the MLS. I can recognize the property in like literally 10 seconds on whether it's probably less than that. Really, initially, just looking at the property, I can identify if it can potentially be split, and then doing further due diligence. I can analyze it in about a minute to see if it to kind of further analyze it, and then putting it on this list takes me a little bit more time. But our kind of my skill set is identifying these deals and like understanding the zoning code and what you can do with these. Okay, I'm going to share my other screen here. Okay, so part of what we do when we find one of these deals of the week is we put this in like our SketchUp program. We put the underlying, so this image is from the Ada County Assessor's site, so it gives you the property overhead. So we can basically put this in our SketchUp program, bring it to scale, and then overlay like our new lots. So to give you an idea, so this is Boise Avenue right here. So this is the existing house. So there's a garage right now, right about here. Now, this house doesn't actually have to have this garage. They do have to have parking, but there's already a driveway off of here that will meet the parking requirements for this house. So taking away the garage isn't going to do anything for this property that would not get it approved. The other thing, so this is another street right here. So this isn't an alley, this is an actual street. And here in a second, I'll show the larger overhead. But there's an actual street, so you can actually have street-facing properties right here. So this lot width right here is big enough in this zoning to split into two, and it's just barely big enough. This lot right here is just barely big enough that you can actually do it per the zoning code, get to the right size lot to do this. This one's more than big enough, and then this one's more than big enough. This one's just barely. So then it gives you two skinny lots. So, if you guys are familiar with Boise, there's obviously like you see row homes everywhere. Row homes are built on these pre-existing flats that are 25 feet wide. So basically all those row homes that you see everywhere, they're already sitting on these size lots. When you develop these two together, you can actually reduce the internal side setback down to 3 feet. And so you can actually get a 17-foot wide house on here. This first level square footage, I think, is 1,200 square feet. Now that's going to include a garage space. It's about 1,000 square feet on the first level, and then you can do a second level. In fact, you can also do a third story if you want to as well. If you really want to get a big house in there, there are some limitations. I should actually caveat that because there are some limitations on these small lots with the percentage that you can, or how big of a house you can get on there. So you're going to actually max out probably around 1,800 square feet. I'll have to look at the exact numbers. And then what we also factored in was having to put in the detached sidewalk. Right now, there's no sidewalk here at all. The sidewalk actually ends at the property next door. The street looks like it's wide enough, so basically, but there is no curb and gutter either. So we factored into the cost putting in curb and gutter up here, and then the sidewalk. We also factored in having to upgrade like the power to it, and then putting a new sewer line to each one of these new houses. So that's likely going to have to come in from the street right here. Now the good news is, like, whenever you add water and gas lines, typically those are covered by those companies on these lots. So like to get the water lines from the water company, they'll typically cover the cost of bringing that to the property line. So they'd probably put it like right here, and then the gas company will cover the cost typically of bringing it all the way to the house. I'm going to share the assessor's overhead on this property so you can get a better picture of the overhead and the area here. Okay, we use the Ada County Assessor's website a lot. This is a great tool. So even if you want to look at properties yourself or whatever, the assessor's website is just a great tool because you can get the overhead map of it, and then it'll show you the property outline. But this is Highland Street right here. So this is really the only way this works is because this lot is big enough and this is facing another street. If this were an alley, you couldn't do it. So just a unique property in that it has the backside of it is facing another street. In fact, if you look at these properties here, most likely these were split off at some point as well. Like, probably at one time, this house probably had this entire lot at some point. So it makes this possible, and you can do it in 2 lots, it looks like. But yeah, then if you look at the sidewalk requirements, the city's going to make you put in detached sidewalks. We already know that. They're going to make you put in the curb and gutter. One thing that we'll do with due diligence is find out like if there's any kind of drainage, storm drainage issues. So if there's something like that, that might actually add some additional costs, or sometimes too the ACHD kind of says, oh, you don't have to build the curb and gutter because it affects the drainage. That's not typically the case, but that's sometimes a possibility. Okay. Any questions with this property before I move on to any others? Feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand in here or put it in the chat if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll start moving on. Okay, I'm going to share the deal list again here. Yeah, so any issues with the canal? Possibly. So that's part of due diligence. We'll have to look at the canal and what that could bring up. It's possible that nixes it all together. That's something to talk with the city about. More than likely, because the property covers it, we can do something over the top of it, and basically just build like a culvert or something underneath. So that's a good question. And again, that's something that'll be during due diligence. Now, the one thing I'll share too is like, there's a lot of questions that have to get answered. And so a lot of people sometimes are hesitant to get these deals under contract without knowing those answers. And what I'll say is that's usually a mistake. It would be a mistake to close on those deals without having some kind of reasonable idea or confidence that it's not going to be an issue. But the mistake is that people make is they want to have all those questions answered before they jump into a deal, and that's just you have to be willing to get something under contract and then find out the answers, because essentially what's going to happen is in order to find out all this information, it's going to take you weeks, and by the time you have all the answers, somebody else is already going to have it under contract. So that's just what happens. It's the same thing with flips. You don't know anything until you start the due diligence process. Same thing with buying a rental, and you try to find out 99% of the answers you can find out during due diligence. And again, that's where we're going to help you too, is we're going to provide the list of things that we need to find out. We're going to have and we're going to tell you how to negotiate the due diligence into the contract as well, because there's certain due diligence timelines that we want to see. So we'll talk about that further on these deals specifically. But there's ideal situations with due diligence that we work into the contracts. If the seller just isn't having it and you have to do a normal due diligence timeline for a single family house, there's still ways to get 90% of those questions answered and be really confident in what you can do. But the whole idea is to get those due diligence questions answered after you get it under contract. That doesn't mean you can't call the city today and say, hey, tell me about this property. The issue sometimes with doing that too, especially if you're not a developer and you don't talk the developer lingo with the city, is the city can get you really depressed about a property really quick, because they tell you, their job almost is to tell you no. And if you don't know the lingo and you don't know the process, you're gonna talk to the city and you're gonna be dejected, and then you're gonna be unconfident on it. Whereas if you just let us do it and let us go through the process and all those steps, we're going to get to an answer that's a little bit better, and at least be confident in what that answer is. It's not always good news, but it's also most of the time different than what the city ultimately tells you, like when you just call them up. The other thing too is if you just call the city, you're not like you're typically not talking to an experienced planner, so there's a whole lot of him and hawing when you talk to them. And then the other aspect to that too is that they don't look at it in depth until you actually start the due diligence process with them and set up that meeting. So they're typically going to give you not very good information if you're just calling to talk to them about it, especially if you don't speak the language. Okay, so we're going to talk about these other deals on the list. So you guys that haven't seen this list before, so we keep track of all this stuff. So if it's in red, it's already pending on the market. So we keep it on this list until it gets sold, and then we put it under the sold properties, because sometimes these actually come back on the market. So like a good example is this 1202 West Hale Street. This was our infill deal of the week back in July, I think July 2nd. And then we also made our infill deal of the week, I think 2 weeks ago. And so it went pending the very first weekend in July, and then it was pending for like 6 weeks, and then it just came back on the market like 2 weeks ago when we made the deal of the week again. So when we originally analyzed this, we looked at it and said, this is actually originally when we looked at it, it was like 100,000, then we kind of changed our numbers and it came down to 54,000. But if you look here, like we analyzed it here 54,000, then we analyzed it like this, and it's 183,000. So you're like, what gives with that? So the reason is because well, number one, we reduce your cash too. So we basically like looked at this, how like if we were to do this deal, the debt structure that we would do, this is the out-of-pocket cost. The other thing that we did with this is we basically are maximizing this as a rent by room structure. So it actually is increasing the value of that existing house. We'd be adding another garage with an ADU above it to the existing house. So you turn a 4-bedroom existing house into an 8-bedroom rental that's rent by the room. And then you can also split off I think it was a 40-foot wide lot off of the north. 40-foot wide lot off. And then you can build another 8 bedrooms on that property and rent that by the room. And look at these cash flow numbers. This is absolutely insane, because you can rent it by the room, because it's like 2 or 3 blocks from campus. So if this were in like West Boise or something, I wouldn't say that you're, to do this structure, but there's other properties, there's all kinds of properties in this neighborhood that they're renting by the room, and you can actually, there's properties on the market that have sold that show you their rents. So these are pretty accurate. The only thing that still doesn't factor in is what you're paying for with your project management, and if you're going to pay utilities, that kind of thing. So there's a little bit more underwriting. When I did the deal of the week on this, I actually did plug those numbers in. And even like factoring in paying all the utilities, factoring in a higher vacancy than what's average, and also paying a higher management fee, I think of 10%. We still had a really healthy cash flow on this. This was still renting out, this cash flow is renting out the larger homes, rent by the room, and then renting the 2 ADUs that you create by as Airbnbs. So you can actually get maximize this cash flow even a little bit better by doing Airbnbs. So yeah, kind of again, all the same numbers. The existing house, so the new house is profitable, and then the existing house is profitable because you are increasing the value with both adding 2 more bedrooms to the house and then also building that ADU. So you're adding value there. This is a pretty healthy remodel budget for all that. And so you're basically creating value on that existing house too. If you notice on a lot of these, you actually end up losing money on the existing house because a lot of times there's not value built into that. So, it's even better basically on these, it's an even better deal if there's some margin on the house itself. But it's still also not necessarily required. So like, for example, 2912 Harmony, this has been our deal of the week a couple times, or yeah, a couple times now. It's been on the market for a while. I think this is 3 months now, maybe even a little bit over 3 months now that it's been on the market. They did an initial price reduction, and after a couple months, it's been sitting now for a couple weeks at 424. It's still overpriced, as a flip for somebody that wants to buy it. If they're going to flip it, they have to get it for a lot cheaper than this. So, this seller has to either be willing to budge on this, or you have to be willing as the buyer to say, okay, I'm going to go in, put in some money into the remodel and end up still losing money on the house. Now it is livable. What I will say is you could actually rent it out. In fact, this strategy with these numbers is factoring in not even not fixing it up right away. So what I would do as the rental, I would buy it. It is basic. It's just a little bit dated, but it's rentable the way it is. But I would, not try to maximize rent, just rent it as is, because you never know when if the renters are gonna, trash a place or cause more damage or cause more maintenance or remodel costs. So while we're going through this entitlement and development process, rent it out at market rates as is. Your rents will be a little bit lower, but then you're not spending the 75,000 fixing up. But then once it's once you have an approval and we start the development on it, then is when you have the you get it remodeled and have it ready to sell as soon as it's legally split, and then you sell that house, and now you're maximizing that return there. And maybe the market improves also, maybe it sells for a little bit more, and then you also make money on the new construction house here. And again, with all these, we have, we analyze this. If you just refinance your construction debt into a longer term mortgage, that's what the mortgage payment would look like here. And then this is what the expected rents would be. So you can still cash flow on this property too. So the two other best deals on the, I said there's three of them. So 1202 Hale, 2912 Harmony is a good deal. And then the Sumac Street was a deal of the week here a couple weeks ago as well. And this is another one where you can actually split off a skinny lot from the side. Oh, excuse me. So this looks odd, but you can actually split, I think it's a 30-foot wide lot off right here. I think this is 35 feet. So you can split off a 30-foot wide lot here. And then since there's a street here, you can actually access parking for this house from over here. So basically, as long as you set it up that way, you can basically separate this into a separate lot. All right, then we have Boise Avenue. The other deals we track are deals where we can build multifamily units, 2 to 4 multifamily units. So like duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. This came on the market last week. One thing I will say about this too, so this came on the market. I actually know the guy that owns this and is trying to sell it. Not to diminish what somebody's trying to do here, but if I were an investor looking at this price, so this house, let me go back to my sheet here. If you run the comps on just the house and don't factor in the land, it's only worth 325. So this guy's smart because he's like, oh, I'm going to sell it for an extra 150 grand because he actually got the lot split approved. Now the only thing is, now just having the experience that I know, so he actually shows this on the chart here. So he actually went through the time to get this approved. What he's not factoring in or telling anybody is that the city is going to make you widen this street. They're going to make you put curb and gutter all the way around and sidewalk all the way around on both properties. So now you're buying a property for an extra 150,000 out of pocket, and you're going to put in an extra, 75 or $100,000. You do, eliminate some of the entitlement costs of this. So you save some money there, but you're still going to have to put in all this infrastructure, and now you're upside down on this development or this property because you didn't factor in the fact that you actually before this is legally splittable, you have to put in all this infrastructure. And that's why he's selling it as this house is fixed up. It's like, he flipped it and he started the process, he got it approved, but he's like, oh, I'm not going to put the money in. I'll just, charge somebody an extra 150 grand for it. And somebody that's none the wiser isn't going to know that, oh, in order for me to have a separate lot, I have to put in all this infrastructure. And they probably don't know what the underwriting looks like on that. So if somebody actually buys this at this cost, I hope they don't. As far as the investor goes, I mean, from the guy that's trying to sell it, I hope he, makes as much money as possible. But ultimately, like, if you're not working with, as an investor, if you're not working with the team that knows what this stuff costs to do and can do it and implement it for you, like, this is a terrible investment. Like, if you look at, I didn't even underwrite this fully because I looked at this very thing. You can actually take the entitlement costs off of here because it's really not going to cost anything to get entitled now. But if you change that to 0, so this is the development costs, and you're going to actually lose. So it's worth 150,000 extra, sure, but that's after you have the entitlement and it's build ready. It's not build ready right now, so you have to put the 54 grand into it to get it build ready, and you're already paying that 150 grand. So you're actually going to lose $65,000 by just getting that lot development ready. And then on the new construction, so we looked at this as I think a duplex, maybe a triplex, duplex. I forget exactly. I mean, it was a duplex with an ADU. So you actually lose money as doing that. Even if it's a single family house, though, if you're walking in with negative equity on this, you're going to lose money or at best break even. So overall, just, again, it's like buyer beware, and make sure that if you're looking at these deals, you're working with the right team that understands all this stuff. I'm not going to cover any of these subdivisions in depth. There's a lot of subdivisions on here that have potential, like really good potential. I own a couple of them myself. If you notice, there's, the lot splits here range from 2 to 17. So the one thing I'll say is if you have other investors that or want to partner with, or you're an agent and you have other investors that that are looking for these mid-sized deals, we can we can do the same process with all this other stuff. The average investor isn't going to look at these, especially not as their first investment. So I don't want to spend too much time on these deals. But if you have somebody that's looking for a little bit better return, and like where you really get into these deals is you get some economies of scale in everything, so you actually get some some really good return on investment. But for people that are just looking to maximize their money on one lot, these deals of the week and the single family deals are really great. We also track vacant lots. Some of these are single family. Again, we won't get into this a lot, but I added a couple deals in Nampa. Like, normally we don't look at Canyon County too much, and honestly, like, these aren't good deals. They don't pencil for us. But we added them because they're build ready. So if the price is right, maybe it pencils, or if we get somebody that wants to do it and makes sense for them long term. But we track these as well. So we look at anywhere from single lots all the way up to multi-units to developments up to usually about 40 lots, what we'll look at. And then we keep track of the sold and closed properties. So that's it. That was a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions or comments about anything? So also, if you guys want to get on the list full time, just reach out to me. I'll send you the recordings of the training. And then we'll have you sign the agreement, and then we'll get you on the list full time. If you want to do a deal on one of these deals that you saw today, or anything that we send out, we can get you set up with the realtors that we have that we work with that have already been through the training, that kind of understand this process. All right. If nobody has any questions, I'm going to stop the recording here.